things. So go ahead and put your questions in the chat room here, and we'll get this started in just a minute officially. But so we're in Hopworks, a urban brewery. So tell us a little bit about
Hopworks Urban Brewery.
Or Hopworks, I'm sorry. I'm looking at Hub, I'm reading Hub. And
that's right, yeah. So it brings up a really interesting question that we get from time to time, especially from our distributors, right? Is it Hub, is it Hopworks? So, for those of you who maybe aren't familiar with the brand, so this is our logo, Hub, and then it stands for Hopworks Urban Brewery. So anyways, we like to say we're both. It's like, Volkswagen and VW, right? We're both. So, anyways, Hopworks was founded in Portland, Oregon, in 2007 by Christian Ettinger. He was previous to that, he was the brewmaster for Laurelwood Brewing, another brew pub here in town. Christian's vision was to create a brew pub that was organic and as sustainable as possible. And so that's really been the leading mantra for us from day one was, to make beers that are as, sort of lower impact to our environment as possible, and then, brew it in buildings that are designed to be lower impact on the environment, and then through daily operations, maintain that low impact.
So are you guys going after like a LEED certification and those types of things?
Yeah, we're not LEED certified. What we do is we just, we sort of look at opportunities from, on a daily basis, in terms of efficiency. How can we be more efficient? How can we use less water in situations where you come up against the, sort of as far as you can go in terms of minimizing our carbon inputs, and you offset the rest with carbon credits and that sort of thing. So,
excellent. So, yeah, if you haven't been to Portland, or if you're in Portland and haven't been here, you should definitely come out. There's an amazing mix of brews that we're very happy to be here Santa tonight.
Yeah, so a lot of just do Northwest style ales, pale, ale, lager as well, and then always have a good selection of imperial, Belgian or barrel aged, and Belgian style as well throughout the year. So a nice variety for sure.
All right, so we're all official. Everybody who's here should be here, right? So this week we kind of went through the idea of how the marketing landscape has been changing. We've been talking about the modern consumer and what's going on in kind of this paradigm shift in and around kind of what we talked about in and around this idea of the philosophy of conversation. So we've moved from bullhorn marketing to where you would go and you would buy billboards and TV spots, and you would tell people you should buy our beer, to, hey, what do you like? Do you like those hoppies? Do you like the reds? Do you like this conversation medium? And so we wanted to come out here and kind of talk to some folks that are actually out there doing this. So let's kind of talk about that. How are you? Give me some examples of some of the things where you're like talking and getting that kind of communal input, that feedback. And really, why I love the story is the whole idea of this lower footprint. I mean, this is those of you who don't live in Portland, this is like you can't get closer to the core of Portlandia, which is the perception of folks out there. But this idea of what it means to live and breathe in Portland, and kind of really trying to tie into the community.
Yeah, so we really have a great culture, a great cultural tie to the community in terms of we really reflect the values of the people that are around us. In terms of the organic ingredients in our beer and many items of our restaurant, and then but the lower environmental impact, and just things like bike culture, right? We've repurposed bike parts throughout the brew pub, right, for light fixtures and a variety of different decor, right up to the banana seat over the top of here, for example. And so But when we moved into this building, we basically deconstructed it from the inside. And so all that material, all that old wood, all came out. Old boiler pipes came out, and then we took that wood and we put it back into the building in booths. The boiler pipe is now the footrail along the bar. And yeah, and so the bike sculpture you see over the top of the bar, that truss that runs the length of the bar, those are all Junker bike frames that we built into this beautiful piece of art and also have a functional purpose in terms of providing light to the bar area. And so I think that's a big first step, right? Is reflecting your community's values in a way that people, when they walk in the door, they're like, this is like the brew pub I would operate it. I open the brew pub. And so there's that piece of it, for sure. And then, of course, as we also, distribute our beer throughout Oregon, Washington, Idaho, British Columbia. So you need to sort of take that same.
Start asking for this, for where you're at. You want this, trust me. This is good stuff.
We extend that, quite obviously, like everybody, right, through social media. And, social media is such a valuable tool in terms of having the same conversation, that same, vibe in terms of you share with people, what you're doing, what's going on. Your values are gonna bubble up to the surface. And again, the people who are drawn to it, the people are gonna be like, man, that's my company. That's like, those are the values that I identify with. And so, while we certainly use social media as a tool to, let people know, like, hey, we're releasing a beer this week. We also just, we do fun, easy stuff, in terms of just saying, like, hey, this is some cool bike event we're sponsoring, or, this is a new cooler we've installed, and it has, controls that make it, 35% more energy efficient than your standard cooler, that sort of stuff. So you can share in a wide variety of ways that people can identify with your company.
All right, I definitely want you guys to start asking some questions. So go ahead and put into the chat room. All right, there we go.
Yeah.
So here's a question: do you plan on canning all of your beer eventually?
I don't think, it doesn't make sense really to can everything, right? Like any company, you have your flagship beers, and those are the beers that we first put into our cans. And so that's, our IPA, our lager, and seasonal. Not surprisingly, you would find all three, or you'll find all three of those in the top 10, if not the top 5 of most popular beer styles as well. The cost of entry to canning is pretty significant in terms of machinery, the minimums for purchasing the aluminum and getting it printed and that sort of thing. And so, it wouldn't make sense to have a beer that was, let's say, only doing, less than, let's say, 5% of your total sales, to go ahead and put that into a canned package. But you can satisfy those needs at a much lower cost per unit basis by bottling. So we do have a much broader variety available in bottles.
So I know you have to step off the camera to do this, but can you go grab those growlers? So one of the amazing things here in Portland, and there's been some legislation that's recently passed in this area, and I have a feeling it will come across, is this idea of the local growler fill-up. And we were talking a little bit earlier about some of these, some of the options. And the traditional, what I'm familiar with from like my homebrew crew and some of this other stuff is this glass growler.
64 ounce.
Yeah, that is
amber glass.
Kind of what we've kind of gone to our local brew pubs and kind of gotten. But this new vehicle here that are, I gotta say that's kind of, this is what I'm going to take on my next marathon when I go for a run. I mean, this is, this is the sports bottle du jour.
It's pretty heavy and unwieldy, but
so, you know what? I'll strap it to my back, and maybe those ones hats.
Yeah, exactly. So this is, it's a double-walled stainless steel, insulated, and so that allows the beer inside to stay cold for up to 24 hours. without refrigeration, whereas glass heat transfers much faster, and so insulation is a really nice factor. Obviously, there's some
Hydro Flask?
durability. This is Hydro Flask out of Ben. Yeah.
Yes.
We started with Hydro Flask. We actually we switched to another manufacturer here in town called 50/50, and just based on we had some issues with seal from the old Hydro Flask caps, and so the 50/50 came in pretty much a similar look. That managed the off-gassing better in terms of giving you a better seal.
Who came up with the half-pint T-shirt? So creative.
That predates me. Before I came here, the half-pint T-shirt was already in play.
Well, first set it up for people that don't know.
Sure. So the half-pint T-shirt, like any brew pub, right? We're a destination, and at Hopworks, we're a very family-friendly destination, and so we have kids' play areas located. We have 3 at our main brew pub, and then we have 1 play area at our bike bar location, a smaller second location. And so, merchandise sales are a key way of doing that. And so, obviously, we have Hopworks gear for adults to wear, but we also have a very robust kids gear section as well. So one thing we always want to make sure we do is mention beer on there. So we can say Hopworks, and like in the case of the logo, it just says Hopworks Beer. We're very underneath half pint, obviously a little bit.
Okay, so we've answered that one. So let's talk a little bit about. So one of the things I love about you guys is you have a variety of kind of really straightforward, kind of graphically pure line, and then you have things like this, the Ace of Spade, the Abominable. You kind of move across the visual spectrum of what you present. So what's the process you guys go through in understanding how you want to? Well, the brewer brings it and it comes with a new recipe, and now we need to come up with a label. What's the process like?
Well, I think the first thing you want to know is where does this fit into your into your company's portfolio, right? And so one of the first things we want to do is we established, okay, so we have our year-round styles. These are available all year. Very clear and distinct between each of the brands. Color blocking so that there's not a lot of confusion in terms of between, let's say, the IPA and the lager. If they're sitting on the shelf side by side, you clearly have the Hopworks identity is consistent across all the bottles, but we use color as a way to distinguish the style contained inside, in addition to obviously the text. We want to make it as easy as possible for our customers to identify which style they're looking for. So we have a little bit of points of differentiation. When it comes to our seasonal meals, so these are basically available either quarterly or on a trimester basis. Again, we looked at this overall sort of like as a system, and we said, well, what's the system? And the system is that there's a lot of variation. We don't want to create a system. We want the art to really draw people in, and so you see that the size of the logo ends up going, decreasing, and we let the art really come forward. So if we take this out of here, this is our current sort of trimester seasonal. As you see, they're like big, bold images coming forward that catch the eye, and then we also have a loose theme of Northwest legends through all of these things. So obviously the Abominable, the Bigfoot running around the Northwest, Rise Up Ahead. There's very slight little hints of DB Cooper throughout here, and obviously we have Mount Hood in the background. And then the Pig Bar is probably the most obscure of our references, and that is this beer. It's a white IPA, so we use unmalted wheat in malt bill gives it that nice hazy cloud. The wheat is all sourced from an estate family-owned farm on San Juan Island. For anyone who knows the history of the pig war on San Juan Island, there was a long standoff between the British and American forces there that was basically started over one farmer killing a pig from a neighboring farm. And so,
how do you tell the story? Like, where
we've got, well, in this case, right, we've got, the bottles are wonderful, right? Bottles give you room to tell that story. You know, you can draw people's eyes in. You get them to pick up the bottle. You get them to say, hey, what's going on? And then, if they're really into it, they're digging it, and hopefully they're enjoying the taste of the beer while they're digging into it. You know, they can do a little story that we give them in terms of the San Juan Island, where the hop farm is that we source the wheat from, and also we get some hops, but a very small amount, not enough to satisfy the needs of a seasonal production. And then this is where the English were camped, and this is where the Americans were camped, and so you sort of see this how San Juan Island, split off in terms. So, yeah, so we use our labels to help tell stories.
So story is a big part of what we've been talking about and what we will continue to talk about. And this is really, and just a side note, I was talking to the founder of the company a little bit earlier and talking about a big project I'm doing for a big, Fortune 500 company about telling stories across all these platforms. And he pulled up a piece of paper and was like, oh, we were doing the same thing. This idea of how we tell our story and how we use our mediums is very important. So the question came across, what specific demographic are you trying to brand to?
Yeah, I wouldn't say we're trying to reach a specific demographic other than the craft beer consumer, in that we don't really want to be exclusive, we want to be inclusive. And so I think we hope that there's a little bit of utilitarian nature in this design that appeals to a lot of people. And I think hopefully there's enough whimsy and creativity that appeals to a broad section of people. Honestly speaking, because of the organic ingredients, we are on the high side of the market sector. I wouldn't say we're overpriced. There certainly are other brands that are on the shelf higher than us that aren't using organic ingredients, just using conventional ingredients, and yet still somehow they justify a higher price point. So I think that we also want to convey a sense of
a premium
quality. Yeah, exactly. We want to be a premium brand, but at the same time, really understand that beer is, at the end of the day, it's fun. Right? Yeah. But no specific demographic, other than people who appreciate good craft beer.
We'll keep the questions coming. Thank you so much for digging into those. So the kind of landscape question of how things have changed.
Yeah.
So when did you start in the craft brewing industry, or in the beer industry or spirits?
Yeah, so I actually am fairly new to. I've been working here at Hopworks for 3 years, and prior to that, I was really just a craft beer fan.
We'll talk about homebrewing a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I moved to Portland 10 years ago, and my friends who were up here were into craft homebrewing, and we're getting sort of into the idea of really getting into the craft beer scene as well, and exploring and trying lots of different brands and flavors and tastes in different breweries. So we started a blog. And really, we started a blog because we wanted to teach ourselves how to use WordPress. And we're like, well, if you're going to teach yourself, you got to do it. And if you're going to do it, you might as well, do something that you like or something that you're interested in. And so we just started blogging about beer, and we started going to events and blogging about beer. And after a while, invitations start rolling in to, hey, come
Try my beer.
come try my beer, come check out this sort of thing. And all of a sudden, like, we were beer media. And so that's kind of how I got my start in craft beer in about 2000. I actually started blogging in 2005, 2006, somewhere around there. And I
So
came to work.
you've seen this grow and change in a big way. You've been a part of this, especially.
Yeah, just following it, and then like actually working inside this industry. I'm coming up on like 4th year here at Hopworks.
Yeah, we can give you a lot more credit than that because you were here. Yeah, I mean, if you're blogging and talking about beer in 2005,
Yeah.
you've seen. So, what from a landscape perspective, and I know, so we have to caveat everything in Portland when it comes to beer and brewing because this is nirvana for beer. It is, for a number of years. But what have you seen as far as the landscape since 2005 to now?
Yeah.
Can
Well,
you give me a
clearly,
description of how it's
I mean, the
changed?
most obvious thing is obviously it's a far more competitive landscape. When I first started kind of waking up to craft beer, there was the brands that have been there for a long time, the Winners and the Issues and Bridgeport, and then there were sort of the smaller breweries that we were into, like Kehe of Hopworks and at that time Roots, before they closed, and but it was just much smaller. And now, it seems like every week, I mean, I work in the industry. I can't keep up with all the breweries that are open on monthly basis. And if you look back at last year, there's a lot of new breweries. And so if you think about that, there's a finite amount of consumers out there. There's a finite amount of money for consumers to spend on craft beer. There's more people trying to get a piece of that, and so I think you really have to stand out and to distinguish yourself in that in that marketplace, because it's truly the competition. That there's just so many people, so many brands, to distinguish yourself in.
Well, and the massive, traditional beer brands have kind of thought they've seen their margins erode in the.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at some other companies when they go through the process of putting out new labels and that sort of stuff, clearly they're feeling it on a much bigger scale than we do in terms of what are we doing? How can we?
Well, Anheuser-Busch and how they're adapting and what they're doing.
That's a whole different piece.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, obviously, craft beer is growing while the overall beer segment, I think, has declined slightly over the last year. And so obviously, what that tells you is the macros are shrinking, the crafts are growing, and and the crafts are the macro beers are coming in, right? I think if you look at Blue Moon and Shock Top and some of these other projects that are maybe not even as clearly labeled as those, and those you have to really dig in to understand who owns those labels. I think that and they've got massive marketing budgets to really come in and a lot of muscle to move people around. And then obviously there's a pricing issue as well. We're much more in a premium, we're much more of a premium. And I think to a degree consumers are still driven by cost quite a bit.
But I think there's a really telling spot there for those that are in this space and want to move into this space that I want to say they're pretending. That's going a little too far.
Right.
And as an academic, I should be a little more fair than that. But they're pretending. I mean, you go and you look, and there's like this little tiny thing, Anheuser Brewing Company. They see the real deal, the writing on the wall. Even though they have a multi-billion-dollar ad spend and the Super Bowl stuff for Bud Light and all that kind of stuff.
I may be a pariah in the craft industry, but I think to their defense, Blue Moon actually it's a well-made beer.
It is, but they don't.
But
They
it's
don't
hard
put Budweiser straight in front. They
Right.
they want to make sure that they put forth that they're. And I think what it is it's not even so much the quality or the flavor of the beer as it is that kind of street cred
It's the muscle behind it as
that
well.
that they can get by not being front and center. They feel like they can get a little more street cred when it comes to
Yeah.
the craft brewing industry.
Yeah, for sure.
So we have a couple of questions. Was the initial brand design in-house, or did Hub hire someone to design a strategy?
Hub contracted with a local designer who helped come up with, the concept, or helped come up with the graphic identity.
Mm-hmm. And that's pretty standard, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, you don't expect a brewer to also have graphic design skills, although amazingly, 2 of our brewers do. So I think the concept was really and we utilized contracted with a designer to help pull that out of him and to create that identity.
The story, I don't know this for a fact, but
Sure.
I'm just implying.
Right.
Like the Northwest characters and those kind of things.
Yeah.
Did that come more from internal and it was expressed via a designer, or did that idea kind of come?
Interestingly enough, I think that the piece, like this thread of Northwest themes, actually really happened organically. We were making beers that we liked to drink, and we thought consumers would like to drink, and so these identifiers, these things, just came up organically, and then one day you're sitting there, you're like, no, that's sort of a Northwest theme, and that's a Northwest theme, and that's a Northwest theme, and all of a sudden now you've got a family, and it looks nicely put together. So sometimes you can sort of get dealt a hand of cards. Yeah, you get dealt a hand of cards, and all of a sudden it's up to you to understand. Okay, what are these 3 things? What do these 4 things have in common? How do we make us a family? Because sometimes the reality is you just want to make a kick-ass label, and later on you figure out how to see the family. Yeah.
Why limited release from a marketing point of view? They're expensive to make.
Talk about it. Plain and simple, I think. If you have a let's say a very limited production of a barrel-aged imperial stout, right? Number one, it's hard to get. So because you've only made, let's say only 4 barrels available. So if you break that down into quarter barrels, there's a very limited amount that's getting out into the trade. I should back this up first by saying, as with everything, the first thing is it has to taste good. So people have to want to drink it. So that, like, the consumer feels like, oh, if I can't get this, if it's only available at Roscoe's, and I have to go to Roscoe's or Apex to get it, and I can't get it at my local water, then it must be really good because it's really exclusive and that sort of thing. So it's like almost like if you have a beer that is sort of hard to get, people play it up in their mind like, oh, this must be really good, and like I probably have to pay a premium to get it, that sort of thing. I think that there's a lot of value behind that, because then people take on to Twitter, like almost like they want to brag, right? They're like, I just had Army of Darkness at Hopworks, like, and then like kind of telling all their friends, like, too bad you don't live in Portland, or too bad you're not here with me.
Oh, so sad. This is the most delicious thing I've ever had.
Exactly.
And I come back, and this isn't just a Portland thing.
Oh man,
the monks, like, oh no, we're not going to share our recipe. But wait, we got to fix the roof of the church. So now we're going to sell and do some international distribution of this thing. We've kept so close, and it's this the idea in marketing of like creating scarcity. But I think there's some reality to that in this industry, in the sense of sometimes you want to play and you want to experiment and you want to try something that you know is good, and you're going to put it out there, and it makes a lot of sense to not,
scarcity drives demand, absolutely, and it drives buzz. I mean, people will I mean, back
It's quality and scarcity.
Yeah, and again, before I was working in the industry, right, and following the craft beer scene around, I remember there was a beer release at the Green Dragon, and I went down there and I plunked down I think I had to buy a ticket in advance.
Yeah.
And I plunked down like $10 for 4 ounces or something ridiculous like that, and I got my beer and I was like, man, this is awesome! I can't wait to drink this beer. And I drank it, I was like, yeah, it's kind of average. It's like, it's all right. But it was like all that buzz, all that excitement leading up to it. Because it was so.
Was it before or after Road Bottom?
Good question.
That's why we're getting into some obscure, like Portlandia.
Probably before, but
yeah, I'm guessing it was.
Yeah, but anyway, so yeah, the whole point was like, I mean, there was this thrill of hunt. A little bit as a consumer, like I'm trying to track down this exclusive beer. There's only one quarter barrel in all of Portland. It's a little bit of the Willy Wonka, right?
Yeah.
I've got a golden ticket, and so that's the real reason to do New Demand. People talk about it, and people, it creates a lot of buzz for sure.
All right, guys, got more questions for us? We definitely want to hear them. Let's talk a little bit about, so we talked about the kind of cultural shift. Let's talk about the consumer.
Mm-hmm.
So, we used to be couch potatoes.
Right.
That was our, that kind of slang for, like these people that are slovenly watching these, big screens in front of their, even at that point, not even big screens, but, these screens in their living rooms. Like, how have we moved from like couch potato to, there's a lot of like hidden beer drinkers these days. It's amazing.
And we're a brand that's really closely tied to that active lifestyle sort of thing, right? I mean, we sponsored a bike team. There's bike teams running throughout Hopworks. A lot of our employees bike to work on a regular basis. And there's a huge bike culture in Portland that we really connect with. I think that there's a place at the table for craft beer after you've sort of used your body like the machine that it's meant to be. You get rewarded a little bit, and you reward it with something that's really good, well crafted, that tastes good. And so I think there's a little bit of that sort of connection to active lifestyles. And I think there's also that piece of then mobile starts to come into play, right? In terms of cell phones and tablets are huge in connecting with those customers while they're out. People checking into beer and on tap and that sort of thing. This active lifestyle, getting out, being on there. So how do you connect with that person? And they're not at home watching TV, getting television advertising. How do you connect with those people where they are and what they're doing? That's really a big challenge for us. Sure.
Here's one from Justin. What are the key channels that you can focus your attention and money on? Are they hosting events or promoting your brand?
Yeah, so every year we have one big event here, Bike to Beer Fest. We call it the nation's only bike Oktoberfest party, and so we encourage everybody to ride your bike on in to Hopworks. We have a day we call Bikes, Bands, and Beers. So we have bike-themed entertainments, BMX stunt teams, and previously we had like bike dancers, and that's like people who are doing choreographed routines on bikes. Then we have a day of live entertainment. So we have 4 live music acts all day, and so it's kind of a 3-ring circus of bikes, bands, and then there's a beer festival happening. Last year we had I think we brought in 15 guest taps from outside and another 12 to 15 Hopworks taps flowing for people. So pretty good options in terms of variety, and it's like a big beer festival celebrating the things we like. That's really our core focus in terms of one big thing. And we sort of view it as a thank you party, and it's a supporter of us. So that's really our one big big event. Obviously, we participate in all the other big events in terms of, Oregon Brewers Fest, Portland International, Seattle International Beer Fest, all the smaller beer festivals as well that happen throughout the year. We love Fresh Hop Fest every year, and Fresh Hop season. And,
Guys do Bones and Brew and all those kind of things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
But
Malt Ball's been a real fun one that we've done that the Oregon Brewers Games put together the last couple of years, where they take local band and a local brewery and put them together and say, make a beer, and then the bands all play, and the beer's all served at like a tween concert show. So a lot of different events, but for the most part, we host one. And it's a lot of work.
There's a lot of events.
Yeah. I mean, and it costs a lot of money. Just, all the permits, the signage, the rentals, everything involved. So, no joke.
Yeah, events become a major component, especially when you become a host or the entity of anything that grows to any size in marketing. So the idea of coming out of the gate as the patron saint of X event, maybe you want to probably start slow and move into that, because also a lot of the students are, thinking about starting their own across the country and across the world in the craft brewing industry. And so we're trying to give them a semblance of there's a crawl, walk, run that we want to kind of work through.
Yeah, I was going to say, for sure, you definitely want to get your feet under you a little bit before you start taking on those pieces.
So trying to find something in your local, your region where you can be a part of that event, but not necessarily the sponsor and the host.
And there's nothing wrong with starting small, right? I mean, it's like Bike to Beer Fest takes over the whole back parking lot of our facility. But before we did that, we hosted Cheers to Belgian Beers in our upper parking lot, about a quarter of the size of that. And so you sort of get your feet under you in terms of these are the things that we need to work on. These are the things we need to improve. Without having thousands of people. Instead, you're dealing with hundreds of people, and you can start to identify some of those problems before they become bigger problems. And
we need more people at the door. We need this, whatever that is.
And you go through that permitting process, and you understand. You've got police, you've got fire, you've got your local beverage control in terms of whatever sort of temporary sales permit you need when even if it's on your property. You're only licensed so many feet from your door, and so if you start serving beer out in your parking lot, you need a temporary sales license, that sort of thing. So you really need to learn all of those things. So it's always good to sort of get your feet underneath you, maybe a little bit smaller event, and then as you start figuring those things out and what's connecting with the people and that want to show up, that sort of thing, then it's bigger.
So how? Here's a follow-up. How do you evaluate the success that your event and adapt that to the following?
Well, I think obviously the cool part about events is you get almost instantaneous feedback in attendance and dollars spent, and so you can sort of break that down in terms of year over year, saying okay, we increased our attendance, or maybe attendance went down, and you have to sort of look at the factors. Was weather a factor? What was going on in the city at that time? That sort of thing. Would we be better off, moving to a different weekend or something like that? One of the interesting things I found out is a couple of years ago, I thought, well, what if we spent more on 4 well-known bands kind of thing, and doubled that spend on entertainment?
Right.
And it resulted in relatively
marginal bump.
Yeah, marginal bump. Certainly not worth a couple extra thousands of dollars that I spent. So that was
so pay their management company and screw with you.
Yeah, exactly. And so so you learn a valuable lesson. You say, okay, well then obviously bands aren't going to drive this thing, right? And so I think it's really this whole sort of piece where every year you learn something new, but the data will lead you to the promised land, right? And so I think attendance and how much what are people spending? How much are they spending when they get here? That dollar per person who's here once they're here, that'll let you know what you're doing right and what you're doing wrong.
Oh, scared me. I think you can still see me, but we just went to sleep.
Yeah.
So I want to reiterate that in a major way because that if you don't think anything else, the data will lead you to the promised land. It's the measure, it's the adjust, it's the understanding what you did, measuring it, and then going, okay, spending all this money to get the, oh, it's, this named band that's on the radio. We'll get them in there. While you might get a little bit of bigger bump, that the margin is like this compared to the amount that you had to spend and the headache you had to go through.
Yeah, exactly. You can spend $2,000 more to bring in a name band that's only resulting in a $500 or $1,000 overall increase. Then you lost that. Right. And you're like, oh, let's not do that. And that whole data piece is so important no matter where you go. I was one of those people who thought that I could just sort of filter the Facebook window. Like, I'm not going to pay. Okay. Yeah, I'm not going to pay. For a post to get additional pickup, that sort of thing. And it's interesting because then Facebook kind of provides you with the tool to show you that if you go on without paying them, the less and less people that you get for doing it. But the data is right there. And I was writing it out, and then I looked, January 1, and clearly changed the algorithm because, I went from, we're coming right up on 13,000 followers, and, we get, 3,000 on an average post, and 5,000, 6,000 if something's really blowing out. We'll get excited about that sort of thing. All of a sudden, it's like I couldn't get out of the hundreds. I said, and I went back and I checked and I was like, yeah, two-thirds of that visibility disappeared.
Comes from the spend.
Yep. And so, the numbers are out there. So I thought, okay, I'm going to dip my toe into this water. $5 a day and bigger than 7 days.
So I want to clarify for those of you that didn't follow that because you haven't actually gone back and done this. What we're talking about is the idea of the ad or the spend in Facebook and how, especially early on, and you've been doing this since 2005 as a blogger and that kind of stuff, you understand, like, early on you could get a phenomenal traction in these social spaces. But really, and Pinterest is wising up on this as well. So spend a little. We're not talking about going out and spending TV money. We're talking about put a couple $100 aside here and there and do some specific targeted things, and it makes a huge difference to your bottom line when it comes to building that community and that exposure. And it's really about how they're starting to learn how they can monetize this. Why is Facebook stock steadily finally kind of come back up and increase? It's because they've been able to show their stockholders, oh, we figured this shit out, excuse my language, but we figured this out, and now, like, and we don't need a bunch of money from everybody. We need $100 from everybody. Yeah. And we're rich as thieves, and everybody else is getting to see the power.
That's a really bad analogy, but they're a little bit like that neighborhood drug dealer, right? Like,
it's a perfect analogy.
Yeah, it's like, oh,
you like this taste?
Yeah, the first one's free, right? And so, we built this robust social media following, and then all of a sudden I see like that pipeline, right? And you're a little bit, as a marketing manager, I'm a little bit like a junkie, right? I need that social interaction. I need that social feedback, right? I'm like, oh, how about $5 a day, right? And so now they got me on a $5 a day habit.
Well, I don't want to go too far down a rabbit hole, but one of the clients we're currently working with, we've literally done the math for them to say, look, you spend $82 and whatever cents it is, like 53 cents. Mm-hmm. For these actions to occur in advertising and digital and in Google and in Facebook, yeah. And we can get you a customer, which for them is like $7,000 a year.
Right. Yeah.
So spend 82 to get 7,000. you can figure this out as a logic, and it's in the data. We come back to what you were saying earlier. The data is brilliant. But we do have another question, so let me ask that. How do you decide which festivals to pass on?
Yeah.
The festivals.
Yeah. Well, that's a really good question. I think, for the most part, like I said, we like to be pretty inclusive, and we try to participate in as many as possible, because each one of those festivals is an opportunity, generally at a pretty low cost, for somebody to sample your beer, right? And to say, like, hey, that tastes pretty good. Like, I want to learn a little bit more about that company. And so I really like the festivals. I would say that, probably the ones that give us pause would be the ones that, there's a high cost of entry to get in. If they're charging you, let's say, $500 to participate, and then, they're telling you, well, the max I'm going to spend for, per half barrel is $135. Basically, at no point are you ever breaking even, right, on your participation. You're sort of making money on getting your beer discounted, and they're charging you up front to come in the front door. There's obviously that cost of access to X number of potential consumers. So overall, I think we really do try to participate in as many festivals as possible. But I would say if it's out of your distribution footprint, that's a good reason not to participate. If it just doesn't seem to be a good fit with your core consumer, then that would probably be a good reason as well. So sort of take it on a case-by-case basis, but for the most part, try to participate in as many as possible. But I would say those would be the main ones. If geographically doesn't make sense, or if it just, whatever the theme of the event is, doesn't really connect with, with us in a meaningful way, that would probably be another reason.
All right, got another one here. Make sure, I felt like that scrolled up, but the font jacked up, so I want to make sure. There we go. What's the key to creating a new customer interaction at a festival instead of just someone who tastes and moves on? Bring them in.
Well, I mean, it always goes back to number one. It goes back to the beer, right? There's absolutely, there's, I mean, the number one sort of calling card of marketing is completely outside of marketing.
Yeah.
It's happening over there as a brewery. If the beer doesn't taste good, it doesn't really matter how much, how much marketing you're going to do on that beer. People at some point are going to drink it, and if you want them to come back, it better be good. So I think that there's a lot of things. There's just the you want to create something memorable, and maybe you want to create something that they can take home with them as a reminder of that sort of thing. I mean, that's why whenever you go to a beer festival, right, you're inundated with chassis, right, stickers, buttons, depends on how people are a participating brewery, but keychains, right? I mean, how many keychains, beer keychains do you have in your head? Well. Right? I mean,
I will plead the fifth.
Yeah. So I mean, it's it's the sort of thing that you obviously in those situations, that customer is talking to a lot of different things. So the beer needs to be good. If you can offer them something to take home, that is sort of a reminder of like, oh right, the company I got my keychain at, I really like that idea, that sort of thing. And then I would say that have fun, exciting, exuberant people staffing your booth. Create connections through personal contact.
And the differentiation in these, I mean, what you guys do in your seasonals, I absolutely love, and that kind of differentiation in the market. And I love the mindset in and around like, these are my solid core, and that's and there's a clear design, distinctive difference between the, hey, I want to, I'm on the in camp and I want to jump out at you, as opposed to I can see and color code and know exactly like which one from this.
And the cool part too is like when you go to festivals, right? You can take,
my burrito is done.
Yeah. Anyways, you can take this distinctive design. You're pouring that beer, and people are like, oh, that's great. Really want to see it. You know, you've got to take this label, and, you know, you can bring it. You know, you can make it into a larger poster. I mean, we take, you know, 5-foot tall banners and reflect the label with us for those sorts of things, so that people are very clear in terms of like, you know, who you are. But the reality is, it's got to be good. The beer's got to be good. That's the memorable part for people. You know, nobody ever says, "Here, you got to try this beer. This label is awesome."
Right.
Yeah.
The label makes them pick it up and look at it and examine it and go, oh.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, there's
And then
a
taste.
great case study we have there, right? And that is, like, I mean, this is by far our most successful seasonal. People love this beer, right? The label, let them take it off the shelf and try it once.
Like drinking it. Which this is this.
So what's inside is what gets them to come back over and over and over, and then you have the dedicated, you know, follower. And then once they love that brand, then they're like, oh, well, I had their winter ale. What's their IPA all about? And that's how you start creating like true fans, people who really want to dig into your brand and be part of it.
Sam or Brad,
Next week, Rise of Red.
this one with me, or
Yeah. We're about
I'm just a sucker for red, so that's my thing. So we got another question out here. Do you strategically market differently to women?
Nope.
And if so, how?
No. I mean, we basically we view all our consumers as consumers, and I think that to say that we, what exactly would we do for women that wouldn't be, to a degree, I guess, a little bit insulting, right? We're
going to put a skirt on the Abominable Snowman.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, and I could sort of back off that statement a little bit. There are some certain things that we do. I think, from a brew pub standpoint, the fact that we have those kid play areas, mom and dad can come in here. The kids can play, not at the table. Mom and dad can have an adult conversation and relax a little bit. Kids are in eyesight, they're playing, they're engaged, they're entertained in something else. They can have that moment, right? When they're just like, oh, you know what? I'm going to hang out and stay here for a second here instead of worrying about chasing kids around, that sort of thing. So it really is a little bit of that piece of it that I would say would be really the only thing, and that's a brew pub based thing more so than a packaged brewery.
It's more of a family focused thing than a women focused thing.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, exactly. It's a family focused thing that you're, that everyone can come together in a communal space, and mom and dad don't have to worry about shushing the kids every minute. Don't climb on that booth thing or just send that lady over there, that sort of thing. As a parent, I know. Going out to dinner at a lot of places can be sometimes stressful, and so if you provide some of these resources, sort of thing, mom and dad can relax on the table. Like the Hopworks. But the most relaxing family dinner we have.
Building that environment and that culture. And we talked a lot about the culture. So let's, we got about 8 more minutes before I need to cut these guys loose. So, we talked a little bit about the kind of changing landscape. We talked about the consumer and how they've done. So the core of what they start, we started week 1 with was writing they have a marketing plan, and they're going through this whole, pretty intensive, large-scale thing, but trust me, this will really help you in the end. They're going through the process and looking at partnerships and all that kind of. That's why I wanted to swing back to. You said you brought in other outside. So how do you talk to me a little bit about that kind of partner and how do you promote others that kind of are culturally fit, or the people that make this bottle, or the other partner organizations that you work with. How do you promote and work with them in this kind of new landscape?
I think there's a little bit of kind of a, in terms of, especially like on our sponsorship side of things, we sponsor and support, through beer, or maybe we're just a movie spot, that sort of thing. But they're organizations that support achieving goals that we have made, right? Whether it's the Bicycle Transportation Alliance or Friends of Trees and those sorts of things that we want to be affiliated with them. And then from my point of view, it's like you get to share a lot of bandwidth with them. When we partner with Friends of Trees, let's say they have X amount of friends and followers through their various social media channels, and we have that. We have our email subscriber list, and they have theirs, and you come together and say like, look, we're working together, and all of a sudden you've doubled your reach. And so I think that's always one way to do it. Is be you can be a megaphone or a broadening of bandwidth for organizations that you support. Great example for this. This is Salmon Safe certification. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with it, Salmon Safe certification is a certification you can receive for agricultural products that effectively mitigate runoff and chemical use that impacts salmon habitat. Many of our organic hops are also Salmon Safe certified. So what we did for one of our single hop ales, this is the IPX, is we took their logo and we put it front and center on our bottle to help raise awareness for this organization and to get people to sort of a deeper understanding, to look for that Salmon Safe certification if that's something that's really important to them. And then again, we devote some bottle copy to deepen that, sort of that connection. Right down to their web URL is more front and center on the bottle than ours. So it's those sorts of things that you tap into their bandwidth, they tap into your bandwidth, and at the end of the day, you're both trying to achieve a mutual goal.
So I know some of your folks may be going like, whoa, what's going on? You keep talking about trees, you're talking about salmon. But this really comes to, these guys know and understand this area and this region. And these are really important cultural facts that tie in. So wherever you're at, there may be other, cultural ties that make sense. But this idea of finding that.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. It's if that maybe isn't the cultural fit for your community, right? What is the cultural fit for your community, and what is the cultural fit for your company, right? We attract a lot of people who are sort of like-minded, that want to work and that want to be part of this whole thing. And so there's an issue of like really being honest with your consumer about who you are and what you want to be. And then the second piece really is transparency. And bring them in, let them know about what's going on, be honest with the consumer, and let them see what you're trying to accomplish. Those are your core dedicated consumers, those are your evangelists, those are the people who are handing your beer out at parties, getting consumers.
I didn't pay him to wrap this exactly like it should have been wrapped, but he just did.
And that's the key. I love transparency, and I'm always trying to say, like, let's do the opposite of these guys, and let's be more transparent and tell people exactly how this is made and exactly what we're doing.
Open and honest. We talked about Zig Ziglar and his honesty and openness in everything you do. We talked about to thy own self be true from Shakespeare, and this idea that as marketers, in this day and age, the idea of screaming at people and telling them what they should think is gone, and it's now a conversation, and it's about being open and honest and true and interacting.
Last year we released our first ever sustainability report, and we said, look, this is our impacts. These are what this is how much water we're using, that sort of thing. And so in 2014.
Is anybody else in the industry doing that? Right?
Yeah, and I think there are brands that we admire that are doing it, right? So the New Belgians, the Sierra Nevadas of the world, right? Brands that are much bigger than us, and they're doing the same thing. But so now what we're doing, right? We're taking that next step in transparency, because not only are we telling people exactly what our water impact is, right? But we're setting goals. We're setting goals stated in that sustainability report for next year, and now we're coming release of the 2014 sustainability report, we now have goals to be held accountable to. And we need to say, like, hey, did we meet this? Did we not meet this? That sort of thing. And so, but at the end of the day, I think there's a little bit of humility and honesty that consumers really connect with. You know, you're human. You're like, oh look, you know, we really wanted to do this, and this is why we fell short.
Not in the nutshell is it. It's about like being open and honest and saying I didn't do it right every single time. The customer these days will, you know, you can do it wrong, but if you say I did it wrong and I admit it and we're trying to do better, you know, we talked to, you know, the United Bricks Guitars. Oh, so United Bricks Guitar is a band. They did basically a music video, and in the music video is them, you know, singing a song of like, where you're sitting in our seats, and the woman behind goes, "Oh my God, look at those! That man is doing those guitars." And they look out on the tarmac, and the luggage carrier guys are just chucking their guitars, and they're broken, and they got there, and the next, their guitars were broken, and it's this journey that they went through from this customer experience with United.
Right.
And United immediately, like in the old guard, you know, like company at that point, like, you know, like PR firm, and oh yeah, you want to fight, you know, like didn't like say, oh dude, sorry, here's you know $500 to buy you or $10,000 to buy you the car. They fought this and did this, and these musicians created this video, and in the end, it cost United millions of dollars to their bottom line, because these guys have like 20 million hits or 30 million hits on YouTube and it's this idea that like these old methods of like, oh yeah, oh we're just gonna knock you down because we own a Madison Avenue firm. That stuff doesn't play anymore. Yeah, if you're open and honest and say, oh, we built the processor and the processor doesn't work, or this beer, you know, it didn't come out right, or whatever that is,
right.
You know, but if you do that, even if you make a mistake, the consumer expects you to know.
Yeah, I mean, I just think that, you know, people respect brands that are, you know, more open and honest and transparent about their actions and what they're doing, and really like what's going on inside that bottle too. You know, like, what are your ingredients? What's your sourcing? You know, we've seen so much interest in, you know, GMO. So we're just continuing to sort of be completely like transparent and open as much as we can with that consumer.
All right, you all need to go to bed, go do homework, do something exciting, go drink beer, actually.
Drink Hopworks beer.
Exactly. Well, and yeah, whatever you got to do, you got to do. But we got to go do some stuff too. So
right.
Thanks so much. We'll connect next week. Cheers. Cheers to you. Have a great day, great evening, great morning, whatever it is, where you are. And remember, always drink good beer.